Today we're looking at Etsy's holiday trend report for 2022, and this year it was a weird one. I mean, on the one hand, there wasn't a great deal there, which is why I almost didn't make this video at all. Whereas on the other hand, if you read between the lines, there is an interesting takeaway, which I think might get overlooked. So that's what we're focusing on today. So more on that in a minute, but right now let's take a quick look at the actual trends as provided by Etsy. And just as an FYI, I like to add my own take and reaction to these trends, so brace yourselves for some sarcasm and silliness. So this year, the trend report was broken down into 3 different themes: style, decor, and gifting. How did I forget the 2 main ones? Now, I'm going to be honest, I personally preferred their format from last year, which is where they provided cross-category trends, which were the trends that kind of applied to all of us, regardless of what niche or category we're in. And then they honed down to category-specific trends. I really liked that. I thought it was neat, it was tidy, it made more sense. I'm not really sure why they took a different approach this year, but you know what? Etsy don't make their trend reports with me in mind. I know. I'm as shocked as you are. So we'll just go with it. So style trends. Glitz and glam, think sequins and sparkly stuff. That was the first trend that they had in that theme. Under that theme, you get my drift. Bold and bright colours, textures like crushed velvet and wool and crochet. Comfort wear like pajamas and stuff, that was mentioned last year as well. There was mention of statement jewellery, and in vintage there was brooches, or brooches if you're Sam Riegel from Critical Role. And they also said that engagements were big at this year, so it was like a shout out to jewellery makers for engagement season. In short, and to put it bluntly, nothing new or interesting here, just the regular trends that crop up at this time of year. So it's not that they're not important or relevant or accurate, they are, but it's just the same old, if you see what I mean. Or at least that's certainly how it read to me. I've seen a lot of these trends crop up year on year, so there was nothing new. Okay then, moving on to decor trends. Home entertaining, again, not a huge stretch. It's the holiday season. We get together as families, we host, we have dinners, the stuff. Again, bright, cheerful colours. Vintage-wise, they went down the sort of kitchen kitsch route. Nature themes is still a big one apparently, so we're thinking colours and textures, so wood, rustic, green, browns, earth tones, kaboom. Kaboom. Again, there was nothing really that stood out here. It was all very similar to what they said last year, to be honest. And then we moved on to the gifting theme, the gifting trend, which is where my attention started to peak a little bit. I'm going to be honest, it was tough reading the first part of this trend report because my eyes just glazed over a little bit. It was very sort of yada, 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 yada. Then it was on to the gifting trends, and this is where my attention finally sat up and started paying attention. I started to focus is what I'm trying to say. So Etsy kicked off this section by emphasising that Etsy is the platform for, how did they word it? Can't find anywhere else gifts. So this weeds out the stuff that you can find on the high street. This is the stuff that you think, I want something a little different. Where do I go? Etsy. Okay, so just to break down the trends, things for the home again. So we're talking about candles, ornaments, wall decor, that kind of kaboom. Jazz stuff. Good God. Fashionable finds was a title that they had, and under that they had jumpers and scarves and stuff. It generic, right? Okay, now this is where my memory starts to struggle, so I'm going to probably refer back to my notes from here on in. So wellness kits, like self-care kits, gift boxes, bath bombs, that kind of thing. That was mentioned last year, as was the next one, which was puzzles. I think I've seen this on every holiday trend roundup. This will be the 3rd year in a row. So we can take it as a given now that puzzles in particular do well at this time of year. I think particularly personalised puzzles do well, but the emphasis is on keeping families entertained, like games that we can play as a family and the like. Gifts by recipient or interest. Now what I mean by this is they've noticed people looking for things such as gift for mum, gift for dad, or by interest, gift for gardener, or gift for football lover, or gift for D&D lover who's never played a game but still loves it anyway. Okay, that's a little bit niche, but you get my drift. Okay, I'm reading now because I cannot remember. And the last few ones are things like scented gifts like candles, wax melts, easy for you to say, and soaps. Gifts for goal setting, I guess that's for the new year where we all like to plan. Yeah, fresh start feels, calendars and planners. Literally did a video on my planner. Hey, I'm on trend. Oh, and handmade gifts like DIYs, kits, you know, that kind of stuff. That's the stuff that I'm trying to pivot into, but I'm not. I've already mentioned it. I cannot go one video without mentioning my pivot. I apologise, I'll move on. And of course the last one was personalisation, because of course. Now I had an issue with this last year because I said that personalisation isn't really a trend. It's one of the biggest reasons that buyers come to Etsy all year round. However, I will give Etsy credit because this year they acknowledged that. They just pointed out that it does peak around holiday season. So credit where credit's due. It's not really a trend, but it's one that does tend to peak around the holiday season. And that's information we need. So yeah, fair enough. Oh, there was something that they mentioned in this section, which was really interesting and slightly confusing. They were talking about the price points that they see work particularly well in the gifting section. Now, they were keen to point out that gifting doesn't have a particular price range that works, but they have seen peaks in certain price ranges, and they shared that with us, which I think was interesting. What was slightly confusing is that they didn't allocate a currency to this. They simply said under 30, let's refer back to my notes, under 30, 50, 100 and over 100. Dollars? Pounds? Who knows? I don't know if they were referring to dollars and therefore for us outside of the US we would have to convert our currency to that point, or if they just meant the equivalent of whatever currency we are playing with and it's more of a psychological thing with those numbers. I don't know. This is the confusion element to this point. It was a good point to make. I appreciate the point was made. It has left me with a few more questions, but okay. Interesting, very, very confusing. Not sure if I will pay attention to that because I don't fully understand the information provided, but it was nice of them to offer it to us. But if anybody from Etsy is watching this, just a little bit more detail would be grand. Thank you very much. All right, so that is a very, very quick review of the trends that Etsy have listed. I didn't spend too much time on them because I feel like a bit mean for saying this, but I didn't see anything interesting there whatsoever, which is why I nearly didn't make this video. But it was the patterns that kept turning up that made me make this video. Because while there was nothing really new or stand out-esque about this list, what was interesting to me was the themes that kept repeating themselves throughout, regardless of whether we were looking at style trends or good decor trends or the gifting trend. They just kept referring to the same things over and over again, which was decor, house, home, gifting. Case in point, because I haven't done this for a little while, I did some word counting. Yep, I did. The word home was mentioned 16 times. Decor was mentioned 13 times. Gift, gifts and gifting was mentioned a whopping 35 times. So although there wasn't that much in the way of brand new trends, that's not really the point of this report anyway. Hear me out. Etsy, respectfully, is not the place you go to keep your finger on the pulse of current trends. Now, I don't mean that in a mean way. Etsy's job is to review what has been selling well, to highlight any patterns that they see, and to report that to us. And they do that by looking back, not forwards. So this isn't a trend prediction report so much as a trend in what has sold at this time of year over the past year. It's basically just giving us clues so that we can make sales so that they can then also make money. Because if there is one thing that we as sellers and they as a platform have in common, it's the fact that sales are good. sales are very good. And that is why I pay attention to these trend reports, because as far as trends go, bit laughable. But as far as patterns go, and also reading in between the lines, they can be quite useful. And it's especially useful to see in what direction Etsy's trying to steer us into. And reading in between the lines this year, it wasn't hard to see that Etsy were trying to steer us into the themes of decor and gifting. Why? Arguably because those are the biggest sellers on Etsy at this time of year, judging by what they have seen in the past year, and probably years gone by too. So my overall take is that if you have anything that can fall into one of these two categories, you're onto a winner. And if there are any of you that are still in any doubt, here's a case study for you. Last year they mentioned personalization, as they do pretty much every year, but also cards, greeting cards. Now at the time I said that I couldn't do anything with personalization, but it sat with me. And when I started the new year, I started off with a personalized gifting card that I had managed to design and make after taking on board this piece of advice from Etsy. It is currently one of my best sellers. God, I hate it when Etsy are right. And it's not so much about the card, I should point out. It was about the personalization element. That is king. So, in a nutshell, if you are struggling to make sales and you would like to make some sales, or if you would just like to make more sales, and let's be honest, who wouldn't? Gifting right now is the area that we should be looking into, which kind of goes without saying, let's be brutally honest. But it was interesting that they focused solely on gifting, decor, and style, because it kind of shows that those are the big overall niches that are doing the best on Etsy, at least at this time of year. That's not to say that if you fall out of these niches that you aren't going to make sales. Of course you are. We're talking about patterns and the overall message. Right, I'm off to go and work on my own kits because I'm behind and I need to get those up for Christmas because apparently they're going to be good for gifting. If you would like to read this article yourself, you can find it over on Etsy in the Etsy Seller Handbook, and I will see you next week. Ta-ra!